Okay, planning board, we are live. We are recording. Phone lines will remain off. Go for it.
Okay. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Town of East Hampton's Planning Board meeting for February 26th, 2025. We have 4 items on for work session. We have a presentation from the Planning Department on the zoning code changes for GFA. We have 1 item on for regular meeting, and we had a couple of UR map modifications and a board of review, which are not going to be on the agenda for tonight. They'll be on next week. So we will start with Tyler Borsak from Planning, giving us the lowdown on the new code changes for GFA.
Good evening. Tyler Borsak for the Planning Department. So the town board is going to be holding a public hearing on March 6th for some code changes, or really 1 code change. And the purpose of tonight's discussion is for the planning board to provide them with comments or any comments that you might have in regards to that change. I'll briefly go over the sort of how we got here and then what the change is, and then make myself available for questions if there are any while the discussion is going on. You may remember a few months ago, I was in front of you discussing a whole suite of changes. This is sort of going to be similar to that, but this was sort of the impetus for the next change that's being proposed as well. That suite of changes is going into effect on March 1st. And as part of that discussion, members of the public and the town board discussed possibly looking at the maximum gross floor area allowances and reducing those numbers to help address overdevelopment that's going on across town. So the current change to the town code is proposed to be a reduction of the current maximum allowance of gross floor area, which is 10% of a lot area, plus another 1,600 square feet. And they want to reduce that down to currently proposed 7% of lot area and 1,500 square feet on top of that. So 3% across the board, plus another 100 square feet off the top. That's the proposed change. It's fairly straightforward. I included some information into the board as well as a graph, but essentially what this shows is lot areas on the left side, and then what would be the maximum allowable gross floor area on those lots based on that lot size. The existing as it is now is in the middle, and then what the proposed would be, plus what that reduction ultimately ends up being. But it's fairly straightforward as far as code changes are concerned. So I'll just make myself available for questions.
I have a question. So just to confirm, this would not apply to basements, correct?
Correct.
And this also would not apply to attached garages? Do I have that correct?
The change for the attached garages code is changing March 1st. And what they're doing with that is any attached garage that's over 600 square feet, anything beyond that 600 square feet would count towards gross floor area. So if you had an 800 square foot attached garage, 200 square feet would count towards your gross floor area. But basements are not included whatsoever.
Tyler, you said that you used the word proposed change, the proposed formula by the board is 7% plus 1,500
Correct.
Square feet. Is that really the proposed change, or is that something that is being considered, which I think is there's a difference?
It's the number that's in the public hearing notice.
Excuse me?
It's the number that's in the public hearing notice for the town board.
And what does the notice say about that?
It says 7% plus 1,500 square feet.
As a proposed change? I don't.
Yeah, that's what would go into effect if they agreed with it, I suppose. That the dimensional table would then read that number.
Right, but does the town board right now, have they determined, have they all voted that that's the number that they want, or is that something that's floating around?
That's the number that they were comfortable going to a public hearing with.
I have a question about the basement. So do you mean just unconditioned basement or?
Any basement whatsoever
Any
does
basement
not
whatsoever.
count towards gross floor area.
Thank you.
Yeah, they didn't move forward with any of that side of the code changes that were discussed.
Thank you.
Which is a nice compromise for people who can have basements, but there are a lot of people who live in flood zones and that sort of thing that don't have basements. Not everyone can have a garage, but
Yeah.
If there are other accessory structures, the overall GFA cannot exceed these numbers. Is that correct?
The accessory structures don't count towards your gross floor area numbers. That's just the habitable space in your building, essentially.
Okay.
In your residence. Anything like a detached garage or an attached garage less than 600 square feet, those wouldn't count towards your gross floor area. They have their own
artist studio.
They have their own, artist studios wouldn't count. They have their own calculations that are based on lot coverage and total lot coverage, really. That's the limiting factors on those.
Okay.
And 600 square feet for accessory structures across town.
Yeah, I presume that was the answer, but I just wanted to be sure. Did you have a question?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Ava?
One quick question about the attached garage. Are we considering attached garages completely attached to the house or breezeway? It has to be.
Yeah, anything that would attach it to the residence. I'm not, it's a building issue. I'm not 100% certain on it, but that part of it has already been discussed and that's been approved. Yeah, that's sort of in the past. The only thing we're looking at tonight is the change in the gross floor area maximum.
You know, I have to say that, looking at this earlier today, I was sort of struck by, how much difference it makes. The 3% and the 100 square feet makes a really big difference, particularly as you get up into half acre and acre lots. It's a significant difference, right? I think this is going to be impactful.
The percentage change has a larger effect the larger the lot gets.
Right.
That flat number really affects the smaller lots more. So by reducing that 100 square feet, that affects the smaller lots, not significantly because you're only taking 100 square feet off, but that percentage really starts to impact the larger lots.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So we are providing these comments to the town board for their discussion about this. Is there anything else that people want to note to the town board about this formula or these numbers?
Yeah, I just, I want to get back to the 7% plus 1,500 versus the 7% plus 1,300, which is what the town zoning code amendment group suggested. And they came up with that number after almost 2 years of deliberation, discussion, analysis. And I think the 7% plus 1,500 was sort of arbitrarily chosen by the board because of some comments that might have been made at the work sessions, public hearings, where they felt that they needed to compromise, and they threw it out there as something that maybe they could consider. But I think the more realistic number, in my view, and the more valuable number in terms of how it was arrived at is the 7% plus 1,300. Now you might think, what is 200 square feet? It's not much of a change, but it could make a big difference in areas like ditch plains, areas in Springs and other parts of East Hampton, where there's predominantly smaller lots. And if you maximize the coverage on those lots by adding 200 square feet, it makes a huge difference. And the other comment that I wanted to make is, I think this problem has surfaced over the last several years, and it's really taken town by storm in terms of interest and concern, that what is happening is the character of this community is slowly, gradually changing. And if we don't put a stop to it with a firm number, with a firm action, it's just going to continue, and we're going to lose what we all treasure out here. So it's very important, and I'm very adamant that we don't go with I would recommend to the town board that they do not go with the 7% plus 1,500. I think 7% plus 1,300 is the minimum that they can go with.
So I would say this, I can't speak for the town board, but of course, public comment, feedback that was given during the process of coming up with this, was taken into account for sure. This is the number, Tyler, that is going to public hearing.
Yes.
I would suggest that anybody and everybody, including you, who has a different view of what this should be, you can speak as a private citizen
Right, but today we're speaking as a planning board, were we not
Yeah, we are.
to make comments?
Yeah, we are. So it's also included there. But I would encourage everyone else to make a comment at the hearing as well, and you can include yourself in that. Or any other,
Well, I respectfully disagree with Lou. First of all, I think we owe a debt of gratitude to the committee that was formed to grapple with this issue, as well as to the planning department and to Tyler. It's not an easy issue. I think a lot of local communities are faced with this. But I mean, this really impacts a family like mine. I have a relatively small lot. You can see the reduction sizes, but I've done the math on this, and I'm going to take a 20% haircut if this goes into action. And I think it's an infringement, quite frankly, upon property rights. So I'm not in favor of it.
okay. Okay, I don't think we need to come to a consensus here. I think we're just simply, giving our individual comments.
Then I think I'd like to just weigh in quickly. I respectfully disagree with both of you. I think that, as Reed said, we do owe a debt of gratitude to the working group that came up with these numbers and to the town board. I think this is a substantial decrease, and I think that the 7% plus 1,500 was reached after, feedback from many different groups. I do think, Reed, you do have a point. It does substantially impact families like ours that live, on smaller lots. So I think the 7% plus 1,500 is a fair reduction in the GFA, and I think the town board should adopt it.
I agree with Jen.
Can I just pipe in for 1 second? I do just, hi, Tina Lagran from the planning department. Just one thing I really hope all the board understands. This one spreadsheet is one of the 1,000 that Tyler put together, looking at different iterations of how to accomplish this in a manner that's as balanced and fair as we could come up with. So it certainly wasn't, something that they picked out of the sky, right? It was months of deliberation among the committee, significant amount of public comment at public hearings, and it represents a compromise, right? Trying to balance all the different perspectives that were provided. And you're never going to get perfect, so it's good to hear this, but I just want to assure everyone that a lot of different scenarios were carefully examined, and this is where everybody ended up, trying to do the best thing in a difficult situation where we have to do something for overdevelopment because we do see the impact that it's having on the town, but we also have to balance that with the rights of property owners, and everybody wants to enjoy their property, so that's with you.
Yeah, thank you. And we know, by the way, and appreciate that there's been a lot of work on this for a very long time.
So why is there any reduction for a 6,000 square foot lot or 10,000 square foot lot? Why doesn't it start at 15,000?
There's a belief that even those are being overdeveloped.
Yeah, I think in some ways it's more important, Frank.
But you can't apply a formula selectively. You have to apply it to the entire town. You can't say that lots below a certain square footage are exempt from this zoning code. You have to apply the formula to everybody. You can't say that it starts at 40,000 square foot lots and anything below that, you can't apply the formula. That's illegal.
Is it illegal?
Yeah.
We had looked at different formulas for different sort of ranges of lot sizes, but
We do it for clearing.
right, we had looked at different formulas for different range of lot sizes,
You
and
could make it work.
it ultimately didn't have any traction on that.
It's kind of how we did it before when it was in A, B zones. There wasn't a formula, it was based on the lot.
Right. We did look at different ideas, but ultimately some reduction across the board that we felt was justified.
Okay. Any other thoughts that anyone wants to express to the town board on this? Okay. Are you supportive, Bruce? No. Okay.
No, I'm not.
Okay. All right, so I'm not sure who's documenting this. Is it you, Tina? Thank you very much. All right.
I'm just gonna come back, sorry. So I'm hearing there's no consensus among the board members. So usually what we do is we send the town board a memo that represents whatever consensus was reached. If we don't have consensus here, what we'll do is say, two members had this perspective, and maybe we could just see what the perspective is, so at least we can give them the feedback. But we'll say that the planning board as an entity did not, come in favor or in opposition.
All right.
Unless we have an opposition.
So let's just be
Yeah,
clear
let's-
about how this struck out. So I think Jen and I are
We're in favor.
in favor of this as proposed. Michael?
I'm somewhat in favor. I'm like on the fence, I think,
Okay. I gather that
No, I'm not.
Bruce
I'm
and
done.
Reed and Ava feel that it's restrictive. And Lou
Lou thinks
feels the opposite,
doesn't
which is
go far
it's
enough.
not aggressive enough.
I think they should go with what the group, the zoning code amendment group came up with,
Okay,
which is different than this.
okay, yeah. All right, I think that's where we stand,
Yep,
Tina.
and we'll send those comments on behalf of the board.
Thank you.
Okay,
6,000 square feet.
thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Tyler.
Appreciate that. Tyler, thanks very much for your work. All right, so our next matter is the Southampton Hospital freestanding emergency room. Will, I believe that is yours, and Jen, that's you for the board. And the applicant is on Zoom. I want to point out, by the way, for everyone's benefit, that it is the practice of this board to require applicants to be here in person for most applications. There's certain extenuating circumstances where we allow applicants to appear via Zoom. There are two of those tonight, and this is one of them. So do we have anyone online for this application, Matt?
I believe you're looking for Robert Ross, and yes, he is on.
Yes, hi. Good evening, everyone. I'm Robert Ross. I'm a vice president at Stony Brook Southampton Hospital, and I believe our engineer should be there in person.
Oh, okay.
Fabulous.
Is Anthony there?
Yes.
All right, so he could speak to the technical aspects of what we're doing. And then if you have any other questions or you'd like an update on what's going on with the facility, I'd be happy to give you that information.
Okay. We just wanted to make sure that you were here, first of all. But yeah, the process is that our planner will kind of review his memorandum, and then our board member, Jen, who's the committee on this, will start the conversation among us. We'll give you an opportunity to actually respond to Will's memo after he's done, before it returns to the board.
Thank you.
So Will.
Great. Good evening, board. So for this project, modification has been submitted seeking changes to a previously approved special permit application. The original project sought to replace 2 baseball fields and accessory structures with a new freestanding emergency department and outpatient diagnostic and imaging center. This modification proposes to make minor changes to landscaping, add fencing, change the location of the sanitary system, and modify the trash enclosure area. The property is located on Pantigo Road in East Hampton and is considered 100% clear of natural vegetation. It is currently zoned CI Commercial Industrial and has been improved with the previously approved freestanding emergency department and outpatient diagnostic and imaging center with associated structures including parking, generator, and ambulance port. Pursuant to the inspection request submitted by the applicant on October 4th, 2024, an inspection was conducted by the planning department on November 15th, 2024. The inspection revealed the work had almost entirely been completed according to the approved plans, aside from the area surrounding the trash enclosure. West of the enclosure, the curb had been modified to enclose less space, and a white vinyl fence was erected on top of the curb, enclosing a majority of the space between the trash enclosure and the transformer pad to the south. In addition, only one dumpster was observed at the time of the visit. and it was unclear if the location was intended to house two dumpsters as shown on the previously approved plans. The applicant stated these changes were made according to instruction received from the Suffolk County Department of Health Services. After the site inspection, the applicant clarified that the sanitary system had been moved from the location previously approved by the planning board to north of the trash, to the north of the trash enclosure, to the area currently enclosed by the white vinyl fencing adjacent to the trash enclosure. The applicant stated the location was changed due to instruction from the SCDHS. The SCDHS also required the new sanitary location to be enclosed by a fence. Because the location of the sanitary system was required to occupy an area which was previously approved to be vegetated, the area has been left unvegetated to preserve access to the sanitary system for maintenance purposes. The planning department notes there are no planning issues in the submission, and due to the minor changes to the site plan which were required by the SCDHS, the planning department recommends this modification be considered complete.
Okay. Does the applicant have any comment or wish to be heard at this time about anything that Will has said?
Not at this time. I mean, if you have any questions about how we arrived here, I'm more than happy to help.
Okay. Great. All right, that's fine. So we'll have our discussion at the board, and you're available for questions.
Yes.
If we need you, and if we have them, you'll come up to the podium, all right?
Absolutely.
Jen.
Thank you so much, Will, for that. I think this is a fairly straightforward modification. I do have one question about the color of the fence, but that's not really within our purview, but it's a very, very white fence. But I do think that, there's really not much for discussion on this one. I think let's get this place open.
Yeah, I agree.
Anybody else?
On total agreement.
Everybody in agreement?
Yep. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. We want this open, for sure.
Yeah.
That sign says April 2025, that's,
Let's do it.
now, right?
And just, it's Robert Ross again, I appreciate the comments that you have made, and I also appreciate the fact that you basically allowed us to put this application on, this amendment on very quickly. There is an urgency here as far as time is concerned. We cannot get approval to open it from the New York State Department of Health until the town issues the certificate of occupancy. And we're hoping that with your approval tonight, that will happen in the next couple of days. There's still work that needs to be done in there. Just to give you a little update, you can't have an emergency department without a laboratory. And the process to get a license for a laboratory is very long. We've been dealing with that for a couple of months now. All the lab equipment has to be tested. The state has to send us certain chemicals that they call reagents to be able to perform these tests. And the tests have to go to back to the Department of Health. So there's still a lot of pieces here to try to get this opened. We are still hoping for the end of April, certainly the first week or second week of May. It's an incredible project. I hope that you guys have gone past it, driven past it. All I know there's a fence there and you're really not supposed to go in. But we're so excited about bringing this to East Hampton. We've worked on this project for so many years already. And, we submitted a grant in 2015 to the state of New York to assist us in building this. They gave us a $10 million grant. 2015, it's now 2025. And I have been telling people lately that the replacement World Trade Center in Manhattan was built faster than this project. So we really, really appreciate your assistance. We hope that you guys will approve this tonight, and the planning department can then get to the chief building inspector tomorrow, and in the next day or so, we could get the CO. So thank you all for your assistance.
Okay, and thanks for your comments. We appreciate it. I will say that once it broke ground, it actually did happen pretty quickly,
Yeah.
all things considered.
Well, we were lucky with the weather. We really didn't have a frost where they couldn't do work. We wanted to get, all the stuff outside done so they could work on the inside. This is a very complicated project. To build anything in New York State that has to go through the New York State Department of Health, it's not like just putting 4 walls up. There's so many requirements and so many things that have to be done to meet code. So we're just incredibly anxious to get this thing open.
We're going to help you do that right now.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions we have to answer as a board. The first is, does the planning board agree the modifications made to the site plan pursuant to Suffolk County Department of Health Services approval are appropriate?
Yes.
Yes, all around, yes, okay. Does the planning board agree this modification is complete?
Yes.
Okay, everybody unanimous all around? Okay. So we will keep up. Sorry?
Do you want to do that?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So we have a resolution tonight actually to move this thing forward. Normally there'd be a week gap, but we have a resolution tonight. So Jen.
So Planning Board of the Town of East Hampton, New York, in the matter of the application of Southampton Hospital freestanding emergency room site plan, Suffolk County Tax Map Number 300-165-5-22. I have read the resolution and move for its adoption.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passed and carried. 7-0. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Good luck with the rest
Thank
of the
you.
process.
Thank you,
See
guys.
you there soon. Okay. For the opening party. For the opening party, I meant, of course. Yeah.
The whole board ends up.
I love hospitals. Okay, let me make sure this is correct. Okay. Right, so our next sub-waiver review is Sidorak Decker. And that is Chris Decker, and that's Lou, that's you for the board. So Chris, please.
All right, good evening. This is the second review of the Sidorak and Decker subwaiver modification at 63 and 65 Seaside Avenue in Montauk. Just to give a context on the properties, are both zoned B residential. 63 Seaside Avenue is 33,329 square feet with 0.77 acres, and 65 Seaside Avenue is 32,062 square feet or 0.74 acres. Seaside Avenue is a dirt road with public water access, and New York State Department of Environmental Conservation freshwater wetlands cross both properties, and access to 63 Seaside Avenue cannot be established without crossing the mentioned wetlands. Those are indicated with this dashed sort of blue polygon crossing the properties. These wetlands are also regulated by the town and indicated on the submitted survey dated October 14, 2022, and the boundaries have been verified by the planning department. So in regard to the application, just to give a background to the board, the modification application has been made seeking a relief of covenants from the conditions of approval reported under the sub-waiver approved August 10, 1977. Specifically, the applicant seeks to relieve the requirement for the subject properties to only be served by one common driveway to serve the 2 lots. Again, the subject properties are 65 and 63 Seaside. Instead, the applicant intends for 63 Seaside Avenue, which is the vacant flag lot, to share an existing common driveway and bridge that are presently serving 59 and 61 Seaside Avenue to the north. That driveway is circled in yellow. Currently, 63 Seaside Avenue is not served by any driveway, and 65 Seaside Avenue has a small driveway with direct access to the street, and that's circled in red. So during the initial review, the planning board unanimously agreed that the proposal is in the interest of good planning, and the board also determined that a change in circumstances was established by the implementation of restrictions for developing near wetlands since the subject parcels were created. The planning department notes there is a pending natural resources special permit application to replace the bridge for the subject driveway, and the department is awaiting revised construction plans for a steel bridge and construction protocol details. So that would be an improvement to the subject driveway. So following the review of the board on August 28, 2024, the board issued a written comment to the applicant as follows. Quote, the board will agree to the proposed modification provided that the property owners of 59 and 61 Seaside Avenue give formal consent to 63 Seaside Avenue. And this must be shown by all parties signing a common driveway declaration before 63 Seaside Avenue can take access from such driveway. The applicant responded by submitting notarized consent letters signed by the owners of 59, 61, and 63 Seaside Avenue granting said permission. And the planning department's assessment of such is that it finds these submitted letters to be satisfactory to consider the application complete and ready for approval. However, the consent should be finalized by all the parties signing a common driveway declaration as a condition of approval before taking access. Other approvals that the applicant is advised upon is from the Zoning Board of Appeals and NRSP. Natural Resource Special Permit will be required to clear or grade and build any structures or improvements within 150 feet of the nearby wetlands. The ZBA approval is not subject to this application and will only be required prior to constructing an addition to the subject driveway. Importantly, the ultimate driveway configuration should seek to minimize wetland disturbance. So in conclusion, the planning department finds the application to be complete and ready for approval based on the formal consent of the necessary property owners, the board's previous determination that the proposals in the interest of good planning and a change of in circumstances has been established. There should be no further issues to discuss. As mentioned, a common driveway declaration signed by all parties would be a condition of approval. And the planning department notes that the resolution of approval would modify language from the original subwaiver approval from 1977. The resolution would modify condition B, which states that access to the subject parcels is limited to one common driveway between 63 and 65 Seaside Avenue. The attorney's office will also need to approve a copy of covenants and restrictions to be recorded against the parcels that would share a common driveway, that being 59, 61, and 63 Seaside Avenue to ensure the access is maintained in perpetuity. That's all.
Thank you very much, Chris. Ms. Wilshire, applicant, do you wish to be heard? No?
Unless you have a question for me.
Okay. We'll see if we do. Lou.
I mean, this is a no-brainer for me. It's one of those situations where the requirements of the code, in this case, the change of circumstance and sort of complies with the common sense solution. So I think it should go through. They should do this. It's in the best interest of the area, wetlands and everything else. So I'm all for this plan.
Okay. Any other comments?
No.
Okay.
No.
It's like something that's being born.
Yeah, sorry. So property lines are going to change? No.
No, the only thing that's changing is that it would take access from this driveway highlighted in yellow, and the requirement for 63 and 65 to maintain a common driveway would be eliminated from the original approval.
Do you guys require the survey to be updated to show the common driveway?
That would happen when they construct the driveway itself. This is just to give it the permission to use that driveway.
Got it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments or opinions? Okay. Yeah, I mean, this really feels like the absolute right thing to do. There's no question about it. We've already determined that. The neighbors have now said yes. I think we're ready to go here. So the question we have is, does the planning board find the application complete and ready for approval?
Yes.
Yes, all around, right? Yep. 7-0. You are ready for approval. So thank you very much, Lori.
Lori.
Okay. All right, so buried my agenda.
Hampton's Racket.
Oh, it is. Okay. So, right. Hampton's Racket is our next. Our next application, Hampton Racket at Green Hollow. That is Will, your application, and Michael, that is you for the board, right? And the applicant is Tiffany Scarlotta. Oh, Britton's here. Okay. So, yeah, just give us a moment. We'll do our usual thing, right? Will present, then you can speak.
Tiffany's on Zoom.
Oh,
Oh, Tiffany's on Zoom?
That is correct.
Okay, well, please let her in.
I am. Here I am. Hi, everyone.
Welcome, Tiffany. All right, Will.
An application has been made to modify a site plan / special permit approval for 172 Buckskill Road in Wainscott to construct 2 padel courts in place of 2 existing tennis courts. Approval for a site plan was issued on February 28, 2018 to legalize several built structures and the existing tennis camp use. The scope of work at the time involved the construction of 2 grass parking areas, removing a portion of the sand area, adding concrete walkways, gravel parking, and relocating a shed. The building permit was issued for this on November 7th, 2019, and has had several extensions of time since. This modification was first seen by the board on February 22nd, 2024, and had a public hearing on April 17th, 2024. Following public comments at the hearing, the planning department visited the site, which revealed structures proposed by the modification were already built and other unapproved structures were present on site, revealing the public hearing was not based on an accurate proposed site plan. The newly configured modification proposal was submitted on January 2nd, 2025. The site is zoned A3 residential and is located within the Suffolk County Groundwater Protection Area and the Suffolk County Pine Barrens. The site is surrounded by residential properties to the west, south, and east, and abuts the Long Island Railroad to the north. The last certificate of occupancy for the site was issued almost 30 years ago on April 13, 1995. The public hearing regarding the previous version of this modification was held on April 17, 2024. That modification proposed 4 padel courts to replace 2 existing tennis courts. Multiple members of the public provided comments, and the applicant provided their response to those comments on May 15, 2024. Due to the substance of these comments, the planning department conducted an additional site inspection after the hearing. Several issues were identified, including the proposed padel courts already being built. Following the site visit, the planning department, town attorney, and applicants met to discuss the project and determine the application required further modification before the planning board could issue a resolution for the project. The applicant then submitted the present modification, which is the subject of this review. The current modification proposes 2 padel courts over 2 existing tennis courts, turf areas, gravel areas to the east and south of the padel courts, chain link fencing to the north and west of the padel area, and planters lining the path to the south of the courts. The planning department recommends a new public hearing is necessary based on the changes to the site, as the first public hearing was based on inaccurate information and not adequate for decision-making purposes. Site visits were conducted on April 15th, 2024 and July 2nd, 2024, and it revealed a number of issues on site, including the presence of unapproved structures and potential additional uses on site. A third site inspection was conducted on January 24th, 2025, which revealed many issues raised in previous reviews had been rectified. One of the remaining issues to be addressed is the presence of a shed just south of the northern property line between 2 large tennis court areas. On previous plans, this shed was labeled as to be removed, yet the most recent site visit, this shed remains, and on the newest survey, this shed is not labeled as to be removed. The applicant should confirm if this shed is to remain or to be removed. The changes made to the site plan for this review show the number of courts on the plan has been reduced to the amount previously approved on the site, 13. Due to this consistency in the number of courts, parking requirements will not be required to increase as part of this application. During the public hearing, one of the comments received stated some courts on site were being used as pickleball courts. Based on the recent site visit and most recent survey, 4 mini courts are on site, though it is unclear how they are intended to be used. During the previous site visits, no usage of these courts was observed. The board should discuss if these courts should be considered playing courts. The area of the courts in questions was not provided on the survey. However, the planning department estimates the entire area is approximately 6,840 square feet, meaning each of the 4 mini courts would constitute a playing court under the town code definition. If the planning board wishes to consider the mini courts as full playing courts, the parking requirements for the site will increase. South of the sand area, the newest survey depicts a building labeled as a shed. This shed was not part of the original approval, and details regarding it have not been provided in the submission. At the site visit in July 2024, this building appeared to be operating as a sauna, and the applicant should clarify the use of this structure. Also during the July 2024 visit, the area surrounding the shed had decking, lounge chairs, sofas, and other amenities which were not listed as part of the application or shown on the submitted site plan. At the January 2025 inspection, these amenities had been removed. The applicant should specify the plans for this area for future summer seasons. At the public hearing on April 17, 2024, several comments referenced the existence of a restaurant on the site, and based on planning department research, a restaurant called V Cafe previously operated there. However, the restaurant was not observed during the site visits. The 1995 certificate of occupancy indicates the site has a clubhouse with kitchen facilities, though no other mention of this clubhouse is present in the building history. Because it is not clear whether the restaurant use is consistent with the approved use on the CO, the planning department recommends as a condition of approval, should the board decide to grant it, prior to building permit issuance, the applicant should seek a determination from the building inspector regarding whether the operation of a restaurant on site is illegal. Should this use not be consistent with the clubhouse with kitchen facilities authorized on the CO, additional site plan approval to legalize the use will be required, although the tennis court special permit standards prohibit restaurants as an accessory use. A chain link fence is present just north of the Patel courts and is shown on the submitted site plan. This fencing was not approved as part of the original approval and was not indicated as part of the proposed work in this modification. The applicant should clarify if this fencing is intended to be permanent. In conclusion, regarding this modification, the applicant should explain the presence of the shed previously labeled as to be removed, the proposed use of the mini courts, presence of any restaurant on site, and whether the chain link fencing is intended to be permanent.
Thank you, Will. Ms. Bistrian?
Good evening, Chairman Krug and members of the board. I'm Britton Bistrian here representing Green Hollow Tennis Club, Inc. I'm joined virtually, as you saw, by Tiffany Scarlato, who's the land use attorney for the owner. I know I think all of the members on the board maybe have not seen this application, except for maybe Reed in your first tenure, you might have. Recently. So I think it's important that it's got a very long history. So I just want to quickly outline that so that we can all be clear on where we are presently and where we've been. I submitted a site plan application to this board in September of 2013, 12 years ago, for a handful of additions that were added to the property prior to my client's ownership and after the last CO was issued 30 years ago in 1995. So they purchased the property with additions. One of them was an extra tennis court. We came in for site plan approval to legalize some of the addition and to remove that tennis court to make it consistent with their original site plan approval. Site plan approval was obtained in 2018. This included a handful of minor items, as I just mentioned, but the largest was for the removal of the tennis court and the addition of a camp use. And recognizing camp use had been on the property, but it had become a special permit use, and we wanted to have that listed. So a camp use was added, and accessory structures relating to that use, sheds for storing of items, and part of that 2018 site plan approval had one of the tennis courts converted into 4 miniature tennis courts for the children's camp use. That was approved under the site plan approval. There is a current building permit to legalize that. We do not have a CO because we're here in front of you asking a modification. So I don't know if it's appropriate to go back and reopen something that has planning board approval and a building permit. That's the point I'm trying to make about that camp court. A building permit was issued. All the work was complete under the site plan approval. When there was a desire, there's a change in the tennis community. I'm sure we're all aware of it. Padel is now very desired. So they wanted to add, an application was submitted to modify their site plan approval before we got the CO to convert 2 tennis courts into 4 Padel courts. That was the application you saw in 2024. This went to public hearing in April of 2024. And from April 2024 until October, the club was embroiled in all sorts of personal and business issues that usurped all of the owners' energies. I don't want to get into too much detail. It's not critical just to know that it existed. And although I note that 2 of the sibling owners got critically ill last spring, which led them to hand off management of the club for the summer of 2024 season. That's the inception of a lot of the things that came up during the summer. A management company came in because the owners had to address a personal issue. Sadly, John Graham, my client, passed away just after the summer. And so they have, his sister, who is still the owner of the club, wants to get this completed, restore the club. She spent $650,000 in the last few months removing everything that was put on the site by a company that was not the owners. They are completely uninvolved at this point. Her desire is to complete this as succinctly as possible. The site, it's completely restored, adhering to the 2018 approval, less the conversion of those 2 tennis courts to 2 Padel courts, and the relocation of a Padel shed that was on the western side of the property to an area adjacent to the clubhouse. So basically the only change from what you previously saw was instead of 4 Padel courts, there's 2, and the shed was moved from one side of the property to the other. There was a suggestion of a new public hearing. If the board feels so compelled, but I don't know if when you look at the difference between our April 2024 proposal and today, the public hearing would be based on 2 less Padel courts and the relocation of a shed. If the board feels that that's necessary, I guess we'll accept it, but we really would like to get this wrapped up and be able to get a CO for the summer season so that we can finally get out of this very long process. The shed that Will had mentioned, that was actually on our original CO initially in the 2018 site plan. They had desired to remove it. It's there, it's on the CO. I don't really need approval to have it stay there. It was to be removed, but if we want to remove it, we can remove it, but it was on our previous CO. In summation, it's our position that this application is complete with the scope of the work for the modification. The whole restaurant issue, every club, I looked at South Fork Country Club, I looked at Montauk Downs, I can read from their COs. None of them actually reference a restaurant. They say, hang on. So South Fork Country Club says, 416 square foot lower level, main floor, interior alterations, storage shed, blah, 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 to an existing clubhouse. No mention of a restaurant facility. Every other club that I looked at has clubhouse on their CO. I'm assuming, I've been to Montauk Downs and had dinner in their clubhouse. I've been to South Fork and had dinner in their clubhouse. It's not a restaurant per se as it is a clubhouse. I believe the reason that this CO in 1995 differs from those is that this property, the building that is a clubhouse, was originally a single family residence. So the previous CO said single family residence with kitchen facilities. And I think they just carried that when they converted it to a tennis club to clubhouse with kitchen facilities. And that's why it differs from the other ones that were built initially as clubhouses. Other than that, I know there's a lot of questions and I could probably clarify anything. I just thought it'd be as brief as possible.
Before we turn it over to Michael to lead the conversation, I just have one question for you. Who is the family going to resume management of this in the future? Have. So the previous management company is not going to be involved.
The management company from April to October of last year is completely.
Is there a new management company? Nope, or is it the family?
Restored back to the family.
Okay.
But it's the single individual.
Okay, that's important.
Fran.
Michael, please.
Tell me the history again of the.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have a question for specifically?
I need to recuse myself from this application.
Forgot that. Yeah. Exactly. All right.
Due to professional ties, I have a conflict of interest with this, so I will remove myself.
Please. We'll call you back in. Sorry, I forgot that.
Tell me the history again of those mini courts?
So when the Grahams took over the club, there had been a camp use in use since the 90s. In the 90s, it wasn't a special permit. It was just something, you had a tennis club and you ran a camp and you had a tennis club. Subsequent to that, it became a use that was defined in the code. So we wanted to specifically have the recognition that it was not only a tennis club with a clubhouse, that it also had an accessory camp use as a special permit use. So we obtained that approval from this board in 2018. And that included some of the accoutrements that are more associated with a camp, a playground, a mini courts, storage, et cetera.
So the question before us, though, is that one plane surface considered 4 courts?
I don't believe that that's actually, and maybe I can get Tiffany and Charlie, but if you have site plan approval on a building permit on an item, is it actually under, it's not under this modification? Are we reopening a discussion that was approved?
I think just as a point, we do have a building permit and are vested in that building permit by having commenced construction and are almost near construction. As Britton said, we only came in for the modification. That was the last item, was the padel courts. So this was well under construction. We've had a building permit for it for quite a number of months now.
Years.
If they have a building permit for it, then it's already, I don't have it in front of me, so I'd have to look at this stuff. I can take your word for it, but I'd like to see the.
Well, I personally see just one plane surface and not 4 courts, because, my daughter has done tennis lessons on a regular tennis court, and there'll be 20 kids and 3 instructors, and so I'd see one plane surface, and that's something we can all talk about to see how. The restaurant, it's not a restaurant, it's a kitchen. And
it's a full service kitchen. So when kids go to camp there, my children actually went to camp there, they have warm lunch. Members of the club have a glass of wine and chicken fingers after playing tennis. Okay. It's a typical clubhouse use. Seasonal. There's absolutely no indoor seating or there's no dining areas. It's picnic tables and stools.
Okay, I want to say, I'm going to interrupt Michael for a second. It has been a restaurant, right? In previous summers, it was V Cafe, right? And anyone could go and have dinner, and there were tables outside on the deck. It was a restaurant. Open to the public.
Right. So how is that different from the clubhouse at Montauk Downs? I mean, I think it's not a restaurant.
I don't know.
It doesn't operate as a restaurant when the tennis club's not operating.
I think I can just speak to Montauk Downs very briefly. That's a very different situation because it's a New York State run golf course, and that's a concession run by an outside company. And
so South Fork. Let's use South Fork.
So South Fork. Members of the public, I don't believe, can go into South Fork and have lunch, right?
No.
So.
Yeah, it's something we need to clear this one up on the restaurant.
At this point, just as a point, and having spoken to the owners, they're not going to be allowing members of the public to eat at this facility. It is for members only.
Okay. Michael, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's all right. Well, also in this memo, is a building inspector determination required for the restaurant or no? If they're saying that no, only members can go, then that's not necessary?
I would say that's probably right? If you're.
We're completely transparent with the fact that the way that this club was run in the summer of 2024 was completely out of the owner's control.
Even thinking of 23, however, it was V Cafe.
Yeah, and there was some joint management prior to that. It's been shaky for a few years, but the intent is to run a clubhouse for the members of the tennis club.
Right.
I think all we're looking for is knowing what's going on there. That's, I think, all we're looking at. And those are my comments.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I didn't address the chain link fence. The chain link fence has always been there. It was the original tennis court fence. It was not something that we've recently constructed, so it just remained. That was the padel court went on a court where there was a tennis court, so the chain link fencing was on the original site plan, but it's been there since the courts were built in the 90s.
Okay.
So it's not new.
Thank you.
What about the number of courts? How many courts do you have?
There's 13 as per the CO, the less.
So that includes the pickleball courts that you,
I think that there was somebody looking at a court, not knowing the camp use of that court and assuming that it was too small to play tennis. There is no pickleball court on this property. There's padel courts
so you
and tennis
added
courts.
2 padel courts.
Correct.
You had 4, but you reduced it to 2. Is that what happened?
We had proposed 4, correct.
So you're still within the 13 allowed courts.
Yes.
And the shed, I read somewhere that it was being used as a sauna.
It has,
Multiple sheds on the site.
yeah, they're all used for storage of items. What they were used for, I mean, if you go to the site as noted in the assessment, every shed is being used as a shed today.
And I think the shed in question is 6 by 6. You
It's
know,
like, I don't want, it's 8 by
which
10.
do you even need a permit for a 6 by 6
do.
shed?
You do, yeah.
You do? Don't go to my house.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to Michael's point, we just want to make sure that everything that is happening is noted, right? I mean, that's really what we're.
Yeah, and it's stacked with furniture or whatever. I mean, it's a nice looking shed. There's
Make
no,
it into a sauna.
and if the board wants to make a condition of approval that all the sheds on site are used for storage of accessory items for a tennis club, we'd be happy to
We
have that
don't
in our
really care, we
decision.
just want to know.
Yeah.
You know, we just want to know. We're not trying to
And I
direct
can't
you.
tell you, I can't speak to what was going on there and, you know, there was a lot of other stuff going on.
Okay. All right. Other comments? None?
I guess the big question is whether the board would overlook the public hearing for the relocation of a shed and the reduction of padel courts.
So before we go there though, hold on one second. Maybe you're going to ask the same question. Courts.
Yes, I was going to ask about the number of courts because I think, can you put that back up, Will, the number of courts? And does anyone have a map? I can't see. Because I think the biggest question I have is 1, 2, 3, 4,
I think
5,
they all
6,
are-
7, 8,
they were
9,
the same.
10,
Yeah.
11, 12. So
13.
13, but the one tennis court with the 4 mini courts does look like, the way the lines are outlined does look like pickleball courts. So does that count as 4 courts? I think I think we need clarification maybe from the building inspector as to what.
So that's what I was driving at, that we have site plan approval for that court and a building permit for it. So I don't know if legally we're gonna, unless you want to.
Right, that's a question we have to answer. We have to get that answered. yeah.
Which court are you talking about? Is that
The
the one
the
just to the right?
This one, where it's one,
That
there's 4 courts on that.
4 mini courts.
And can you
For
bring up that?
miniature
I
tennis
think you have
courts.
a
So they
picture,
can't.
Will. Will has a picture.
4 courts that could be used for pickleball. So the issue is,
Yes, these
if
guys.
if they make available pickleball courts, 4 of them, that means that you're gonna need more parking. That means that the total number of courts is more than 13, which brings up the question of parking. So that's the crux of the issue.
Yeah.
And how do we know, like Michael said, it's the same area, but then if you take that area and turn it into 4 courts, so you have each pickleball court has 4 players. So that means the number of people that attend.
So the pickleball, if you look, there's no pickleball offered on this property. That court was approved as part of our semi-public facility and the camp use under this board in 2018. So that's the assurance that you have. That court was created for a children's camp use.
Right.
So that was
Was it
approved
one,
in 2018.
right, I think, right. So I think we just need clarification if it's 4 courts or 1 court, because that would.
Yeah.
What she's saying, it was approved for 4 courts in 2018.
It was approved as a tennis court being converted, yes, it was approved as this, as a mini camp court for the special permit use.
So
And at that time, this board approved it and did not say that it needed additional parking because it was 1 court that was being used for the camp.
Right. Okay. I mean, if that's the case,
That's the
Charlie,
case,
I
yeah.
think.
And we have a building permit, we just don't have a CO because we're here for the modification.
If that's in fact.
You can, it's a thick file.
Okay. Yeah, so my other major concern was the restaurant, but I think you've informed us that there will not be a restaurant other than kitchen facilities and some food being served to members.
Right, and we can also make that a condition of this modification, that the kitchen is for the clubhouse and for members of the club.
Wow, good. People do miss that VP.
Protection.
I know, people being ed.
So I'm sorry, can I pipe in for a second?
Please.
Because I did look in the previous file and I wasn't able to I did find a reference to the conversion of the site to semi-public facility, which allows the camp use, but not like specific reference to the mini camp courts. And the reason we brought this up, I just want to remind the board is because it's public comment, right? So we're really just trying to be responsible in understanding what the public comments we're getting at and what's going on at the site if it's not what's there. Looking at the 2018 site plan, there's not 4 mini courts shown. We'll double check that these dates are right. And if you have something different, we'll definitely look at it. But so just so that's there, the use was, a camp. But I don't see the 4 courts there.
If you look at the aerials, they were there.
The aerials,
and I'll find, I know the file, there was some issue with this file in scanning or something, and I have a thick file on this, so I could definitely pull up board minutes where we had lengthy discussions with this, about this particular issue.
Yeah.
Right.
Just to clarify,
I think that'd be that would be great if we could do that.
I'm curious, how many members belong to the club, and is the membership number capped? Is it just open to anybody in the summertime?
I don't know. It's not open to anybody. I know there's an application process. I don't know, my guess. It's not a heavily traffic. The camp is utilized.
Well, I'm actually very happy to hear the Graham's family is taking this back over to manage. So I think there was a lot of, feeling that this could really get out of control. That the last management company had a reputation for certain kinds of uses that probably are not compatible for this kind of a site of the neighborhood. So that is good news.
And they have a lot of remorse for, obviously they had to dedicate, the sister had to dedicate her time to keeping her brother alive and had to not run the club, and it didn't without oversight, it didn't go well. But I'm very sure that they'd like to see it back, especially in John's honor.
Okay. All right, so let's just clear up the couple of issues that we've discussed, and we can come back and get this whole thing resolved. In the meantime, we'll answer the questions, which are, does the planning board agree a new public hearing must be held because the first public hearing was based on inaccurate information? How do we feel about that?
Well, I think there might be a benefit to holding it only to explain all of the things that we just heard tonight. Because, now we know about the restaurant, now we know about the, pending the, receipt of the site plan from 2018, I think now we understand a little bit more about it. And maybe if the public hears it again, it might be beneficial just for,
So that's a yes.
That's a yes. Very long-winded yes.
It's a good yes, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should have a public hearing for a little bit of a different reason. I think the public's been involved in this throughout. I think we've gotten a lot of good comments from the public. To shut them out at this point, I think would be unfair. I think it would be good to hear from them again.
Yep. I tend to agree. I think that that's right. There's been a lot of misinformation about what's been going on, and a lot of misinformation and sort of speculation about what's happening and isn't happening. So I think it's a really good idea to clear the air. So that's a yes.
Okay. I'm not sure what another public hearing will bring us. We have a lot of information already, but sure, I would say, yes, let's have a public hearing.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll clear up everything that we've sort of talked about over the last year.
Yep.
So for sure.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I'm sure they're itching to open for the summer, so if we get them up again.
Well, they're kind of going pretty much as they would be, right? This isn't really going to hold anything out.
Okay.
They've done all these improvements already.
Yeah.
So it looks like we're 6-0 with one abstention for a public hearing.
Get the other back.
Do we wish to consider the miniature courts full playing courts under the town code definition? And Britton and company are going to be looking into what was approved the site plan that was approved in 2018, what it has to say about that. Should the applicant seek a building inspector determination if a restaurant is planned to operate on site? And we have heard there will be no restaurant on site.
And their willingness to make that a covenant.
Exactly, and their willingness to covenant that will be the case going forward. So I think we're good. We'll see you next time. Britton, thank you. Okay.
Send it, Evan.
So why is everybody here? What are you here for? Tell me before we get started on this next application.
Mobile.
Okay, so just so you know, this is not a public hearing, and in fact, this is a preliminary site review. So this is a highly preliminary discussion about what the applicant's intentions are. So there's not typically an opportunity here for the public to speak at this stage of the process. You're always welcome to make written comments to the planning board. I have agreed to let one applicant speak after we've had our conversation, but if I've made a mistake by doing that and everyone else wants to speak, I'm gonna have to rescind. So are we good to listen, or what's your intention? All right, I'm going to assume that you're not here to speak. But there, you'll have plenty of opportunity to opine, I promise you.
I'm here for 9 Blue Jay Way.
It is not on tonight. I'm so sorry.
Oh. That's not what I was told by email. When will it?
Next week.
Next week.
Same time, same place.
Glad I raised my hand.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. All right, so Chris, take us through the BOLA application.
Thank you, Chris Stecker from the Planning Department, and this will be the preliminary site plan evaluation.
I'm sorry.
Doing this? The Blue Jay?
No. You're the applicant, you guys? Okay, thank you.
Good to go? Okay. This is the preliminary site plan evaluation for BOLA Amagansett, located at 130 Main Street, Amagansett. The subject parcel outlined here on the aerial map is 24,752 square feet, or 0.57 acres, and is in the central business zoning district. The parcel is also within the Amagansett Historic District and is therefore subject to the specific guidelines under town code. I'm going to pull up the plan. Preliminary site plan application has been made to consider redeveloping the existing filling station and repair garage into a retail store and takeout food store while maintaining the existing filling station use. The retail use would include a BOLA convenience store, and Tim Hortons would be the takeout food store within the same building. Both businesses are considered formula businesses under the town code and are therefore subject to the specific standards and safeguards for those uses. With 3 uses on one parcel, the proposal would also be considered a multiple business complex, which requires a special permit as well. The project involves expanding the existing 1,379 square foot one-story building to 2,376 square feet and building a 21-foot tall canopy shown here. The heights to be confirmed, 1,943.5 square foot canopy over the existing 4 pump islands and 8 gasoline dispensers. The proposed expansion includes facade changes. Let me pull up the elevations just to give you guys context as we go. The proposed expansion includes facade changes with added windows and reverse gable roofs for the main entrance and 4 windows along the roof facade. Also proposed is curbing that would add 14 parking spaces to the site. Currently, there is no striped parking on the parcel, so the current amount of parking spaces is unknown. Some existing structures are proposed to be relocated, including a generator, tank vent risers, propane storage cages, and the vacuum and compressed air station. The 3 existing fuel storage tanks, underground tanks, the underground propane tank, 3 single Fixture light posts and a business sign on the street corner are proposed to remain. The project will require variances from the Zoning Board of Appeals to ZBA, and I'll get into that in a moment. Preliminary site plan applications are not subject to the State Environmental Quality Review Act secret. Upon formal submission, the project would be considered an unlisted action pursuant to secret in Chapter 128 of the Town Code. Given the proposal includes a retail use on the same parcel as a filling station, a use variance would be required per Town Code, and it is recommended that upon formal submission, the Planning Board requests lead agency for this project. For preliminary site plan applications, just a reminder, per Town Code, quote, "The purpose of preliminary site plan review is to enable the applicant to examine a forthcoming site plan submission with the planning board prior to the applicant committing substantial effort or expense toward the plans and details necessary for a formal site plan application," end quote. The board should provide its overall comments with respect to the overall development plan, including site layout, proposed uses and density, adequacy of parking, and whether the project as proposed is in the interest of good planning. The preliminary site plan is a one-time review to provide this overall guidance to the applicant. Going on to the issues relating to the project itself. The change in use. The proposal involves changing the existing uses from filling station and repair garage to a filling station, takeout food store, and retail store as mentioned. Per Town Code definition for filling station, which is included in this evaluation, no convenience establishment or other retail store can be located on the same parcel as a filling station. Given such, the applicant should determine whether they will seek a use variance from the ZBA for a filling station and retail store to be on the same parcel. The applicant may also consider dividing the parcel between these uses. However, some restrictions may prohibit the parcel from being divided into conforming lots, which I'll touch on in a bit. Should the single parcel remain intact, the proposal would be considered a multiple business complex, as I mentioned, which is another special permitted use in the commercial business zoning district. Now moving on to the dimensional conformance and variances that would apply to this project upon formal submission. Regarding the principal building, the white here shows the existing building and the gray shows the area of expansion. Let's see if I can zoom it in a little bit. The existing building is non-conforming due to a portion of it being within the 25-foot rear yard setback requirement. And the planning department notes that per Town Code 255-860, the zoning board has limitations on granting variances for expanding non-conforming buildings. The ZBA cannot grant variances that would increase the gross floor area GFA of the non-conforming portion of a non-conforming building by more than 50%, unless the variances would meet the following condition under that code. The ZBA, quote, "shall be authorized to grant a variance or variances which would increase the gross floor area of a non-conforming building in the following instances," end quote. The applicable instance for this application is likely, quote, "if the variance would increase the gross floor area of the non-conforming portion of a non-conforming building by no more than 300 square feet," end quote. The submitted plans did not identify the area of the existing building which is non-conforming, and upon formal submission, this must be provided. The planning department measured this area at approximately 450 square feet. Therefore, the maximum expansion of nonconformity a variance could grant would be 300 square feet for the subject building, as per the town code I just quoted. The proposed building addition is approximately 15.5 feet from the rear property line, where the minimum setback is 25 feet required. The area of nonconformity for the proposed addition appears less than 300 square feet and is approximately 270 square feet. Therefore, a variance from the ZBA does not appear to exceed the cap in the limitations under town code, and an area variance would be required to approve the non-conforming portion of the building addition that does not comply with the setback requirements for the principal building. Upon formal submission, the applicant must indicate the existing and proposed areas of nonconformity of the subject building. Next would be the accessory structures for this dimensional conformance and variances. The proposed canopy, again on the north end of the property, is within 2.8 feet of the property line where 10 feet is required. Given that the structure would be considered an accessory structure, the planning board has authority under town code to reduce the necessary setback during site plan review. Should the board decide not to reduce the mentioned setback, an area variance would be required to approve said setback of the proposed canopy. Other accessory structures are proposed to be relocated within 25 feet of the required setback from the rear property line to the south. These include the tank vent risers, propane storage cages, the generator on the east side of the building, and then you have your air compressors and vacuum stations, which are located along here. The formal submission should indicate setbacks for these structures and propose screening for the planning board to consider reducing the necessary setbacks. The applicant must provide information related to noise generation for the generator, vacuums, and air compressors. Provided the applicant can meet noise standards and provide adequate screening from adjacent properties to the accessory structures mentioned, not including the proposed canopy, just the ones that I've mentioned, it may be appropriate for the planning board to allow the reduced setbacks. And I note the adjacent land use to the south is commercial and is also zoned commercial business. The proposed total coverage, so moving on to coverage, the proposed total coverage is not included in the submission. However, it appears the project would exceed the 80% total lot coverage permitted in the commercial business zone under town code. And this figure should be included upon formal submission to determine whether the variance would be necessary. Regarding use and additional area variances for the project, as referenced earlier per town code definitions, a filling station and retail use cannot be on the same parcel. Therefore, if the applicant wishes to maintain the single parcel, use variance must be obtained from the ZBA. In order to grant the use variance, the ZBA must find that the proposal is consistent with the standards in Town Code 255-8-50 that state, quote, "The board shall find and fully set forth in its determination that the applicant has shown unnecessary hardship," which shall mean that under the use regulations contained in this chapter, the applicant cannot realize a reasonable economic return from the property, lot, or land in question under any of the uses permitted by this chapter, and such lack of reasonable return is substantial and has been established by competent financial evidence, end quote. From the materials submitted with the preliminary site plan application, compliance with these standards is not evident, as there is an existing building on the parcel, business on the parcel that has been in place for many years. In addition, it is noteworthy that per formula business special permit standards in town code, quote, "Only one formula business shall be permitted per building or lot, except for a lot containing a legal multiple business complex. A multiple business complex may have 50% of the permitted or special permitted businesses be formula businesses," end quote. With 3 uses proposed for the lot and 2 of them being formula businesses, an additional use variance would be required to have more than 50% of the businesses on site be formula businesses. Alternatively, the planning department notes the applicant could seek to subdivide the parcel, and in that case, area variances would be required to legalize non-conforming lot sizes and setbacks. The minimum lot size in the commercial business zoning district is 3,000 square feet, which would apply to the retail and takeout food store uses. Per town code, a filling station is required to have a minimum lot size of 20,000 square feet and maintain a street frontage of at least 100 feet along the highway. Given the existing lot size of approximately 24,752 square feet, the positioning of the existing building, it is not likely that 2 conforming lots can be created. Dividing the parcel may also create dimensional conformance issues with respect to setbacks for the accessory and principal structures. The applicant should review Chapter 220 subdivision of land in the town code and determine whether they will divide the parcel upon formal submission. In this case, an additional use variance will still be required to permit 2 formula businesses in the same building on the subject parcel. Per town code, only 1 formula business can be permitted per building or lot, except for a lot containing a legal multiple business complex. The next issue is regarding lot coverage in general, so I'll go on to that. The proposed lot coverage is 17.2%, approximately 4,257 square feet, which complies with the maximum lot coverage of 50% in the commercial business zone. And this only applies to the building and canopy. Upon formal submission, the applicant should include the proposed lot coverage in square feet and provide the existing lot coverage. The lot size should be confirmed with a certified survey upon formal submission. Regarding the total coverage, which applies to all structures, the applicant did not include any information. Per town code, the maximum lot coverage is 80% in the CD zone, which is approximately 19,801 square feet for the subject parcel. The planning department is unable to determine the proposed total lot coverage since it is not clear where landscaping is proposed to replace existing asphalt. Particularly along the eastern and southern portions of the parcel, it appears that some landscaping, if proposed, but the existing underground propane storage tank and stormwater drain will remain. As proposed, it appears the project would not comply with the 80% maximum total lot coverage. The formal submission should clearly indicate landscaped areas where existing asphalt will be removed so that area can be omitted from the total lot coverage calculation. The formal submission should indicate the existing and proposed total lot coverage. As mentioned, an additional area variance would be required if it cannot conform with these requirements. Moving on to the special permit standards, which there are a few for this proposal. Since the proposal involves expanding the existing GFA by more than 50%, the project is considered substantial expansion by town code. Therefore, the project is subject to specific standards under the town code. Given such, the board should consider the general standards for special permit uses and the specific standards and safeguards for filling stations to determine whether the proposal is in the interest of good planning. Also, the proposed Bola Market and Tim Horton franchises are subject to specific standards and safeguards for formula businesses under the town code, which I will detail and are attached to this report. As discussed, if located on the same parcel, the entire proposal would be considered a multiple business complex. Compliance with all three special permit standards being 1 for the filling station, giving the substantial expansion, 2 the formula business, and 3 multiple business complex. Those all have specific special permit standards, and the general standards will also be required to consider. So the board should consider the impact on specific existing uses, particularly the adjacent St. Thomas Episcopal Church to the west and the Nichols Livery Stable building to the south. Also, the board should discuss whether the proposed use is compatible with its surrounding, particularly regarding visibility, scale, and overall appearance. Regarding the specific standards and safeguards for filling stations under town code, no church shall be located within 500 feet of the site. Driveways must be located at least 20 feet from any side or rear property line, and all pumps must be at least 50 feet from any building structure or street line. All three of these conditions are violated by the current and proposed nature of the filling station. However, given past approvals of the station and a fire marshal finding no issues with the proposed site plan, the location of these structures mentioned should be satisfactory. The planning department notes that the 4 existing pump islands and 8 dispensers are proposed to remain in their existing locations. The submitted plans are missing the required circulation diagram to show, quote, how a number of vehicles in excess of the maximum number of which can reasonably be expected to be using the station at any one time will be serviced at the pumps, and how adequate room for such vehicles to queue within the premise will be provided without adverse effect on entrances, exits, or off-site traffic flow, end quote. Site navigation is an issue with the proposal and is further discussed under site navigation. Lastly, the formal submission should confirm that at least one pump attendant will be present to provide full service as required by town code. Regarding the specific standards and safeguards for formula business, as mentioned under town code, only one formula business can be permitted on the subject parcel. The planning board should consider the mentioned standards and discuss whether the businesses are, quote, designed in a non-obtrusive manner to preserve the community's unique rural and historic character, end quote. The design should support the town's rural, semi-rural character and unique qualities of the Amagansett Historic District. Lastly, the design must use a unique visual appearance that is consistent with the character of the town and not homogeneous with the formula businesses designs in other jurisdictions. The board should discuss whether changes to the exterior facades would be appropriate to make the application more compatible with the surrounding community. The planning board should also consider specific standards and safeguards for multiple business complexes under town code, which are attached to this report. The applicant should review this section of code prior to making a formal submission with the intention to make the proposal compliant. Next is the historic district guidelines. Since the subject parcel is within the Amagansett Historic District, is subject to specific standards, the guidelines contain general regulations for the Amagansett Historic District and specific guidelines for the subject parcel itself. The town code encourages wood facades on commercial buildings. However, the existing building proposed for expansion is brick. Ultimately, the Architectural Review Board, the ARB, will decide whether the proposed facade is appropriate due to the conversion from a repair garage to a retail store. Changing the facade to align with the district guidelines may be appropriate. The proposed facade includes beige for the decorative columns and reverse gable portions of the roof facade. The elevation drawings do not specify the building material. The planning department notes that the town code encourages natural shingle siding or siding painted white along with white trim as appropriate finishes. Given such, the applicant should consider using natural wood that is not painted or is painted white. Per town code regulations for development on the subject parcel, quote, any site plan review should have the goals of maintaining the open space west of the building, removing intrusions from that space, and enhancing the visibility of Nichols Livery Stable from Main Street, end quote. Also, quote, any changes should be reviewed to enhance compatibility with the historic district, end quote. Given such, the board should consider whether the proposal would negatively impact the adjacent church to the west and the Nichols Livery Stable building to the south. In particular, the board should discuss whether the proposed canopy would have a negative visual impact on the historic district. The planning department recommends that renderings depicting the proposed canopy from different vantage points within the historic district be prepared upon formal submission to facilitate this review. Regarding signage, the proposed includes illuminated signs on the front facade and the west side facade of the building. Town code states that exterior, internally illuminated signs are prohibited in the town. The sign may be illuminated by an overhead light, which complies with the town code general lighting standards. ARB approval will be required for the signs upon formal submission. Next is parking. It's a long presentation. The proposal includes 14 parking spaces, including the one required ADA accessible space. The submission used the appropriate minimum parking space calculation for the retail and takeout food store use, which would require the 14 spaces. However, the submission did not include the necessary parking for the filling station use. Per town code, filling stations must provide a 4-space queuing line area for each pump, which I'll get to, and 1 space per employee. The applicant should confirm the number of filling station employees that will be working at one time and add the necessary parking space or spaces in the formal submission. Regarding the dimensions of the proposed parking space, each space is 9 feet by 18 feet, which does not meet minimum dimensional requirements, and the formal submission should come into conformance with said requirements. Next is the site navigation and traffic. So the proposal does raise issues of site navigation and traffic. The plans must demonstrate that access across the property will not be disturbed when the pumps are in use. As mentioned, a 4-space queuing line for each pump dispenser must be provided and indicated with dimensions to ensure queuing lines do not spill off the subject parcel. So that would show by each dispenser, you'd want to see that 4 cars could be lined up for them all without impeding access to parking or across the site. Also mentioned, the applicant must provide a circulation diagram that meets the mentioned standards to show how the site will operate when the number of vehicles on site exceeds the maximum number of vehicles typically expected to be using the site at any one time. the queuing line should provide adequate space to maintain conforming drive aisles to the planned parking spaces. The planning department notes that access to the ADA space may be limited with a queuing line forming at the nearest gasoline dispenser. Per town code, a minimum width of 24 feet must be provided for all drive aisles for parking spaces at a 90-degree angle with said aisle. The revised plan should indicate the drive aisles for the parking spaces and ensure they do not overlap with the necessary queuing lines for the gasoline dispensers. The submission includes a fuel truck delivery plan where the truck would effectively block off 4 of the 8 gasoline dispensers. The applicant should explain whether an alternative delivery route plan can deliver fuel without reducing access to the dispensers. Also, the proposed dumpster enclosure, which is to the east of the building here, would have limited access when those nearby parking spaces are being used, and the applicant should consider an alternative location that would not reduce access for garbage trucks to empty the dumpster. It is noted that part of the requirements under town code for a formula business is the preparation and submission of a traffic study with specific information requested by the planning board. The board has the authority to waive this requirement. However, the planning department recommends that such study be required in this case. The site location experiences heavy traffic, and trip generation associated with the proposed use must be thoroughly analyzed in that context. The study should also consider peak seasonal traffic conditions and include existing conditions, traffic counts representative of those conditions. Planning department recommends that a scope for the study to be submitted for review before it is conducted to facilitate agreement on the scope of analysis required and the methodologies to be utilized by said study. Moving on to landscaping. Comprehensive site landscaping plan should be submitted. The landscaping plan submitted is missing some elements. The location of existing landscaping, including lawn areas, should be indicated. The symbology used in the plan for each plant species should be added to the landscaping plan key. Planning department notes that columnar sweet gum trees planned are known to have invasive roots and fruit. While the plant species is not prohibited, it is recommended that another species be considered. The proposed flowering annual should provide a specific botanical name, common name for the proposed plants, and they should be indicated in accordance with the standards listed in this report. As always, the applicant is encouraged to use native vegetation wherever possible for new plantings. Regarding the proposed lighting, a comprehensive site lighting plan which meets all provisions of the town code as well as the planning board guidelines for exterior lighting should be submitted. The submission includes a lighting plan which is missing some necessary details. Lighting manufactured or supplied product information sheets that include photographs of the fixtures and indicate the photometric distribution type, quote, full cutoff, end quote, of the light fixtures are missing. The color temperature in degrees Kelvin must be provided and cannot exceed 3,000 degrees Kelvin. Also missing is a type of control, for example, motion sensor or timer, with times indicated. The lighting plan is missing a key that meets the requirements listed in the report and must include symbology to indicate the different fixture types. Regarding the 3 existing single fixture light posts, there's 2 along the highway and 1 along Indian Wells Highway. They are spilling light across the property line where the foot candles must not exceed 0. These lights should be removed or altered to come into conformance with the code, and all exterior light fixtures must be fully shielded as defined by town code. Regarding noise generation, touched on this, but the applicant must provide manufacturer specification sheets with sound data in decibels A, and corresponding analysis for the exterior equipment for the generator, vacuums, and air compressors that are proposed to be relocated. The information is needed to show compliance with town code noise standards, and the rear setback should be indicated for each noise generating element. Next, regarding the covenants and restrictions for the properties, pursuant to the special warranty deed recorded March 3rd, 2011, future development is restricted by the following covenants and restrictions which are applicable to the proposed work. Per the deed, quote, all buildings constructed on the property shall be constructed on grade and shall have no living, working, storage, or parking areas below grade. end quote. Also applicable is, quote, if at any time a new building foundation is installed on the property, that prior to commencing any construction related to the new foundation, grantee at its sole cost shall install an impervious liner under the new foundation to act as an effective vapor barrier, end quote. The applicant is advised to review the deed and ensure the impervious liner meets the standards outlined within, and development follows the requirements under the engineering and institutional controls portion of said document. Any development on the subject parcel must prioritize using engineering controls to prevent the migration of vapors and liquids containing contamination into any buildings, underground utilities, or stormwater runoff. Our next issue is regarding environmental remediation. The potential for environmental contamination is an issue on parcels with filling stations and repair garages. The applicant should detail whether any soil studies or remediation efforts have been conducted on site and what work was completed if applicable. The applicant should also specify whether environmental remediation will be a part of the formal submission. Prior to soil disturbance, it must be ensured that the on-site soils are not impacted by petroleum or other potentially hazardous substances that may be on site, and that workers performing construction will not be impacted by such. The planning department notes that soil testing in areas that excavation is likely warranted if no data on these matters is available. The applicant should also demonstrate compliance with applicable regulations for storage of hazardous materials, either existing or proposed. Any facilities to be removed must be addressed in accordance with applicable regulations, and the applicant should provide documentation that demonstrates this. Next, regarding the sanitary system, the submission did not include details on the existing or proposed sanitary systems. This is not necessary for a preliminary application. However, the planning department notes that upon formal submission, the applicant will be required to install or upgrade the current system to a low nitrogen system. The work will be subject to Suffolk County Department of Health Services approval and must comply with the town code. Regarding engineering comments, the town consulting engineer reviewed the application, made comments in regard to the following. For grading and drainage, which is also not necessary for preliminary applications. The engineer notes that the application would need to demonstrate and provide calculations to verify the existing drainage capacity conforms to design standards of the town code and is adequate. The engineer notes that should additional drainage be proposed, improvements should be clearly annotated on the site plan drawings. Also, for the proposed canopy and building, stormwater runoff should be directly piped into drainage leaching structures, and the piping should be indicated on the plans. The engineer also made comments regarding the sanitary system, proposed parking, and exterior lighting, which are addressed elsewhere in this report. The engineer's report is attached and readily accessible. Regarding the Office of Fire Prevention, the fire marshal findings indicate the proposal is sufficient or not relevant to necessitate further review for fire protection purposes. Regarding the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, the findings indicate the exterior plans are ADA compliant and the interior plans will be subject to the building permit review. For other approvals, the applicant is advised that upon formal submission, additional approvals for this project will be required from the ARB, the Architectural Review Board. The review is required for all commercial structures which require site plan approvals except for parking lots and driveways. The review will include the proposed changes to the exterior color of the building, signage, exterior lighting, and other design elements. The applicant is advised to review the Amagansett Historic District guidelines. Office of Fire Prevention. Fire marshal must approve for interior compliance with the ADA for the building permit, but no additional fire marshal review is needed for the planning board review would be needed. From the zoning board, the ZBA, an area variance would be needed for the proposed addition within 25 feet of the rear property line setback to the south. The proposed canopy within 10 feet of the property line to the north if it's not waived by the planning board. An area variance may be required for the total lot coverage if it exceeds 80%. A use variance and special permit variance to allow more than 50% of the businesses to be a formula business would be required if the parcel is not subdivided. An additional use variance would be required to approve a retail establishment on the same parcel as a filling station. If a subdivision is pursued, an area variance or variances will be required for non-conforming lot sizes and setbacks. And an additional use variance would be required to approve 2 formula businesses on the subject parcel. Suffolk County Department of Health Services approval would be necessary for the sanitary system, and Suffolk County Planning Commission review. This would be subject to review given the subject parcels within 500 feet of an agricultural district and along a state road. Lastly, before going to the conclusion, okay, we're going to skip the necessary elements because this is long enough. Okay, in conclusion. During the preliminary site plan review, the planning board should consider whether the proposal is in the interest of good planning. The proposal would require multiple variances from the town code, including potentially from use standards, special permit standards, and area requirements. It is not clear from the current application materials whether the project is likely to meet the variance standards, the guidelines of the Amagansett Historic District, and whether they can be adhered to for this application will also be a key issue. The proposal includes adding 2 new uses, which are both traffic generators to an already congested area of the town. This must be carefully reviewed in a thorough traffic analysis to determine if significant impacts to the roadway conditions would occur. The information submitted was insufficient for the planning department to determine the feasibility of the parking layout and whether it will conflict with the necessary queuing lines. The formal submission should clearly indicate compliant drive aisles, parking spaces, queuing lines, to ensure sufficient space. As part of the preliminary review, the planning department recommends that the board relay its overall comments, overall site layout, proposed uses, density, other key elements as mentioned. The board should consider the mentioned sections of the town code to determine whether the proposal is compatible with the surrounding community and in the interest of good planning. Last thing, the board should consider the visual impacts of the proposed canopy and whether it will impact the visibility of the adjacent Nichols Livery Stable building. The board should also consider the design of the building facade and whether it is compatible with the historic district and East Hampton's rural, semi-rural character. The applicant is advised to review the comments provided and specify what variances will be sought upon formal submission. And upon formal submission, the planning board should seek input from the ARB early in the planning process regarding the Amagansett Historic District guidelines and whether the proposal is appropriate. Thanks for your patience.
Take a breath. Thank you so much, Chris. That was a very, very thorough analysis. And we typically do not go into this much detail with a preliminary site review, but we thought it was really important for you to have some very thorough guidelines and guidance as to where you may need to go next. I mean, the conclusion, pretty much calls into, summarizes pretty nicely the sorts of things you need to think about. So I will call you up if you'd like to make any comments. I don't expect you to, no, I'm sorry, Mona, I'm thinking of the guys in the back.
Oh, the guys in the back.
Hang on.
Okay.
Obviously, we don't expect you at this point to respond in detail to all of Chris's points, but your name and your business address, please.
Good evening. For the applicant, Matthew Ingber from the law firm of Brown, Altman, and DeLeo, 538 Broad Hollow Road, Suite 301, Melville, New York. Just before we begin, I would like to thank the board for considering BOLA's preliminary site plan application. I'd also like to thank the planning department for its very comprehensive evaluation of the project. We will consider, the comments, in the evaluation as well as from the board and any comments the public may have upon formal submission. Our project engineer, Nick Buscemi of High Point Engineering, is here, and he would like to address some of the comments in the evaluation memo and could walk you through some of the additions and improvements that BOLA is seeking to make.
Name and address, please.
For the record, Nick Buscemi, PE, 5 Point Engineering, office located at 1860 Warwoodman Road, Suite 600, Melville, New York, 11747. I would just first like to thank the planning department and board for this memo. This is one of the most well-detailed responses, and I wish every town would provide something like this. A few items that I don't want to, I'm going to keep this brief. I don't want to go through every single item. There is some items that I just feel are important that you guys should be made aware of. The first item that I just would like to discuss is the environmental remediation as well as the sanitary system. So per Suffolk County Department of Health, standards, we have to go through what's called the wastewater management review. That is for your septic system. Part of that review, it's required that we get a no further action letter from the Office of Pollution Control. Part of that no further action requirement is you will have to test what they call the UICs, your underground injection control wells. That is just a fancy word for dry wells where your rainwater goes. So all testing of soil will be required on site as part of the application. That's something that is not driven by the town, that is driven by the county as it is under their jurisdiction. Regarding the landscaping, so we took a look at what we were looking at for our existing and proposed coverages. As part of this application, there is going to be a 20% increase of green area on the site. Behind the building, you'll see we are removing some of those items, and that it will all become green space. The applicant does do 4 seasons landscaping, so he is regularly and actively changing out landscaping throughout all of his sites, which he has over 200 within the area, in the New York metro area. So that is something that they take pride in. And then to just kind of wrap up everything that we saw, I did just want to speak quickly to the issue of the principal building and the area of nonconformance. The area of nonconformance right now is 577 square feet. That area is that 25, any portion of the building within the 25-foot rear yard area. As part of this expansion, which is the area shown in gray, it's a 234 square foot of increased nonconformity. That is a 40.5% increase. So that is allowed to be part of the application and to be considered during the zoning board. Like I said, I wanted to keep it brief. I just wanted to throw a couple of facts out there. We understand there's a lot of people here, and I'm sure you guys have a ton of questions. So if there's any, please feel free.
Okay, any questions, or should we turn this to Michael to lead our discussion?
Can I just, Tina from the planning department, I just want to address something that gentleman just said regarding the environmental remediation. As the seeker lead agency in an environmental review, the board absolutely does have the authority and the obligation to review whether or not on-site contamination may be a concern and to understand whether the proposed testing, soil removal, disposal, handling practices are in accordance with appropriate environmental guidelines. So I just wanted to put that in the record there.
All right, thanks, Tina.
So I would like to begin with a couple of examples of businesses and their architectural styles. The first is the Burger King in Southampton. And it is, do you know it? It's driftwood gray, it's asymmetrical. It looks like it could fit anywhere in Southampton. It's doing its best to fit in. The other is, if you ever go to Stratford-upon-Avon, where Shakespeare was born, there's a rows of buildings. I went there years ago, and I swear it said, "Ye Old McDonald's." And it was an Elizabethan architectural style. It fit in. So let's come to Bola in Amagansett. And let's start with the canopy. So if you go past, you go through Amagansett and you go past the IG, I think it's called Marketplace now, and there's a Shell gas station there with a canopy where the clearance is 14 feet. It looks to be maybe 18 feet. This is a massive accessory structure. Now there, it's 20-something feet off the road. You guys are proposing less than 3 feet from the sidewalk, and I guess you're going to ask us to waive that requirement. I don't think we're going to waive that requirement. So that means 10 feet. Does that even cover the one of the sets of pumps there? I don't think so. So yours is also 21 feet. Your principal structure, I don't even think is 21 feet. This corner it's a conspicuous spot. It's the beginning of the historic Amagansett. It is an important spot. All these people, there's more people than in this room that care about this. A about the idea of subdividing this lot. I live in Waynescott, and near us is a speedway that did do that. They subdivided it. The front is pumps. The back is you get your milk or Slurpee or something. That is a rectangular lot, much bigger than this. You already are, just what we see, you're already subjected to multiple variances, special permits. To try to subdivide would just be more variances and permits. You're putting 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag. My recommendation is to take every paragraph of Chris's excellent memo to heart. It is a great memo. I don't think I've seen a better memo here. It's fantastic. Those are my comments, Ed.
Thanks, Michael. Let's go around the room. Bruce.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Michael. I would have to say that this corner, I don't think is the beginning of the historic district. I think it occurs further west.
Yes. Well,
for context.
The beginning of the shops.
Yes, beginning of the shops. But I think in context, look at the bigger picture, right? What do we have across the street to the south? We have a historic building, the church. Behind us to the south, we have the livery stable. Across the street, we have Miss Amelia's. That starts the historic, say, Main Street, downtown of Amagansett. So visualizing the site coming in, the canopy, I don't think fits at all, being 3 feet from the property line. The building architecturally, I know we really can't talk about architecture. That's really not our purview, but thankfully it does say we can comment on it in our memo. Architecturally, I don't think this fits into the site, the town, the Main Street at all. Get into the nitty-gritty, circulation through the site, looking, at your site plan, circulation, I don't think works either. And again, I just think there's too many uses, like you said, 10 pounds in 5-pound bag. I think my only other question was here, understanding percentage of building nonconformity. I think they addressed that. That's it for now.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. Reed, what were your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I thank the applicant, and I think every application deserves a fair review, and I think we're just giving some guidance this evening. I see the first sentence and the conclusion. The planning board should consider whether the proposal is in the interest of good planning. And I don't want to be discouraging, but I'm not so sure. I think this is a heavy lift, quite frankly. I think you're asking for quite a bit. Joe Potter once said to me, he said, Reed, it, unless it's wintertime, you wouldn't know if you're in Madison, Wisconsin or Madison, Georgia. I mean, everything in America is kind of becoming, everything's the same. And we got something really special here, and I think we really need to keep it special and protect it. And I think that this is an overreach. That's my take on it.
Good, thanks, Reed. Ava.
Yeah, to kind of, jump off what Reed said, in the interest of good planning, and as a resident of Amagansett myself, this is a big lift, a big ask for a main entry point of the village, mainly the hamlet of Amagansett. And during the, high traffic time of the year, which now has extended every year, month into month. Anyone who travels eastward past Brent's knows that from that light onward, it's crawling. And this is not a big lot. And this is a lot of stuff going on a small lot. And Michael, I liked your reference of Waynescott, where that is a much larger space. And while it is also on a very well-used, traveled thoroughfare, I just see the traffic alone being a major major issue here. And the parking, to have a convenience store or takeout place in addition to the gas station and filling, and I just don't see it all fitting all together personally. My 2 cents.
Thanks, Ava. Lou?
Okay, I made some notes and, excuse I'm gonna not be that brief. I want to cover a lot of things. As a preliminary site plan application, we are expected to provide comments pertaining to various elements of the site plan and to determine whether the project as proposed is in the interest of good planning. I cannot stress it strongly enough that in my view, this project as proposed is the antithesis of good planning. It's more suited to be placed on the side of the Long Island Expressway as a truck stop than to be at the forefront of the historic district of this quaint bucolic section of Main Street in Amagansett. Furthermore, it violates numerous town code restrictions and standards to which it is subject to, namely, a filling station use cannot be combined with a rental use. This project has 2 retail uses. Numerous variances to setbacks of the main building, the fill pumps, the canopy, coverage, multiple formula businesses on the same lot. The project is also subject to a number of town code standards, which in my view, it fails to meet a number of them. For example, Section 255-540, Special Permit General Standards, the compatibility. The proposed use will be compatible with its surroundings and with the character of the neighborhood and the community in general, particularly with regard to visibility, scale, and overall appearance. It definitely does not meet that standard. Section 255-550, Special Permit Specific Standards, with regard to filling stations, setbacks, proximity to church, historic buildings, driveway setbacks, and pump setbacks, all in violation. Finally, formula businesses. The formula business must be compatible with existing surrounding uses and designed in a non-obtrusive manner to preserve the community's unique rural and historic character. The approval of the formula business shall be consistent with the policies, goals, and standards of the comprehensive plan, including but not limited to consideration of the following goals, all of which this project does not meet. A, maintain and restore where necessary East Hampton's rural, semi-rural character. B, protect the natural and cultural features identified in the comprehensive plan. C, protect historic buildings, hamlets, neighborhoods, landscapes, scenic vistas, and it goes on and on. Three, for the formula business with a designated historic district, the planning board shall find that said business shall comply with the preservation goals set forth in the town code for that specific historic district. The formula business shall not contain the features or attributes of the formula business except for the service or product. I could go on and on because we've been here a long time. I don't want to extend this, but this is a non-starter. I can't, again, like I said, I can't stress that enough. Those are my comments.
Okay, Lou. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. I agree with everybody's sentiment that I don't think that this project fits in with the historic district of Amagansett. I think, for the town, a town that has spent so much time and so much energy in preserving open space and scenic vistas, to have this as the entrance to Amagansett Hamlet is just, like Lou said, a non-starter. I also don't think that there's any hardship proven for changing, for proving that you need the change of use into the retail and takeout food. There's, it's a very successful filling station and a garage. And I think Ava is also correct. The traffic implications are just, kind of mind-boggling when you think of adding 2 additional uses to that very small lot. So yeah, I agree. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, Jen. So we'll have to echo most of the comments that we've heard around the table. I will say that, Reed makes a good point that we, every application that we receive deserves a fair shake. But, this is so inconsistent with our code. There's just one challenge after another, and use variances are really difficult in this town, right? That's not up to us, but, we take them very, very seriously. Formula and, as you have heard, and I'm sure you knew prior to coming here, formula businesses are something that they're discouraged and kind of approved only under very special circumstances. So this is, as other people have said, a very heavy lift indeed. And if you choose to continue to pursue this, you've got an extremely thorough outline here of what needs to be done. It's a lot, right? And I'm not sure that, the ZBA is going to be up for the number of variances that are required here. I mean, any way you want to go with this is going to require a complicated set of variances. And I am certain that there is going to be a lot of discussion in the neighborhood about this as well. So with that, we'll go over the questions, and then if you still want to talk, Ms. Klopman, I will let that happen. But first, we're going to go through our questions. Does the planning board agree with the planning department's preliminary assessment of additional information that must be provided per town code 255-650, necessary elements of the site plan? Yes, right? Should the applicant provide the necessary details on the plans to determine if the proposal complies with the 50% cap for non-conforming building expansion? Yes.
Yes.
Should the applicant demonstrate compliance with general special permit standards, specific standards and safeguards, and the Amagansett Historic District guidelines?
Yes.
Does the planning board consider the proposed canopy to be a potential negative aesthetic impact within the historic district? And should alternatives be considered to ensure this is minimized?
Yes. Yes.
Does the planning board agree that a traffic study scope be provided upon formal submission?
Yes.
Does the planning board agree that renderings depicting the proposed canopy from different vantage points within the historic district be provided upon formal submission? Yep. Okay. Does the planning board agree that a noise analysis including indicated setbacks be provided for the generator, vacuums, and air compressor upon final submission? Yes. Does the planning board agree that a revised comprehensive landscaping plan be provided upon formal submission?
Yes.
Does the planning board agree that a revised comprehensive exterior lighting plan be provided upon formal submission?
Yes.
Does the planning board agree that total coverage calculations be provided upon formal submission?
Yes. Yes.
Does the planning board agree that the existing and proposed areas of nonconformity in square feet for the building be provided upon formal submission?
Yes.
Does the planning board agree that the number of filling station employees be provided in the formal submission?
Yes.
Does the planning board agree that compliant parking spaces and drive aisles be indicated upon formal submission?
Yes.
Does the planning board agree that details on past and proposed environmental remediation efforts be provided upon formal submission?
Yes.
And finally, does the planning board agree that details for the proposed sanitary system and drainage structures be provided upon formal submission?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Tina.
So our questions kind of covered a lot of the detail, but I realized we should have put a question just to summarize. Does the planning board think this is in the interest of good planning and agree that the proposal is something they would want to entertain? I mean, I heard a lot of,
I was going to say,
yeah.
when I was listening to the questions, I was saying this is really superfluous. Because this is such beyond the pale.
Yeah.
That we're getting into detail that I think is unnecessary.
Well, we provided the detail because we want the applicant to understand how much was needing to be addressed with what they provided. But yes, the overall concern, and you see it peppered throughout our review, is that it is not consistent with our code in several different, several ways that are really fundamental to the way the code is set up. It doesn't look to comply with the special permit standards or the variance standards. So I think, having something in the record that goes out to the applicant that communicates the board wants to see kind of some fundamental changes is also.
Yeah, I agree. So shall we add that as a question?
Yeah,
That-
you know,
So the question should be, do we feel as though this application is in the interest of good planning?
right.
I guess that's the question,
Yes.
really, right? Okay. We'll go around the table. Is it in the interest of good planning?
No, I made that pretty clear. No, I don't.
Absolutely not.
No,
No.
sorry,
No.
I answered for Reed, I'm sorry.
All right.
All right. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Sorry, it was a rough one. Rona, 3 minutes. Okay?
Do we have a timer?
2 seconds.
Okay, just state your name and address, please, for the record.
It's Rona Klopman, 184 Marine Boulevard in Amagansett. And as chair of the Amagansett Citizens Advisory Committee, I would like to commend Chris, Tina, and this board. First of all, for allowing me to speak, even though it was a preliminary hearing. But it was like the best thing I could hear, the best words I could ever hear was what everybody said on this board and what the planning department said. So thank you very much. Is that quick enough?
That's good. Thank you so much. I like that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. Not a public hearing, guys. All right. But if you want,
Quick comment?
you'll have to make it from the podium, but quickly, please. Name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Victor Gelb. I'm co-president of the Amagansett Village Improvement Society, 99 Hedges Lane, Amagansett. I would just like to point out to the board that at a preliminary meeting, you have representatives of both the concerned Citizens Advisory Committee and the AVIS to express our vision that this is not an appropriate project, and thank you very much for seemingly to agree with us. That's it.
Thanks for your comment. All right. I think we're done on that one, right? Let's see, we have minutes to approve from our last meeting. Yeah, we're not doing these tonight.
We did Southampton,
Yeah, we did Southampton already. We did that resolution, exactly. Has everyone reviewed the minutes? Are there any comments, suggestions, recommendations, thoughts, changes? Are you gonna?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Make that motion.
Move to approve. Second, all in favor of approving?
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, he's back.
He's back.
So Reed.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, you guys